let's move on. We are now going to learn Mizmor Beis, which I remind you is one with Mizmor Aleph, according to the Gemara. Okay, before we go through it pasuk by pasuk, I want to structure the Mizmor for you. We'll go through it now one time to get the structure. It's a very tightly structured Mizmor. I'll show you the patterns, and then we'll go back pasuk by pasuk and understand it better. Okay? There's a lot of parallelism in this Mizmor, meaning, let's say right away in the first pasuk, you have the pasuk is, I don't know what the technical term is, with A-B pasuk, where the first half parallels the second half. You see that a lot in the whole Mizmor. So, Lama Rog Shugayim, L'umim Yagurek. Why are the Goyim making this such noise, tumult, and L'umim, which is a synonym for Goyim, they're Yageh for nothing. Okay. And then the next pasuk describes, I think the way we have to read the next two psukim is, pasuk Beis describes the regesh, where they gather together in a noisy fashion, like in a mob, right? Yisyatzvu malchi eretz v'roiznim ostiachas. There's a parallel, A, B, and then al Hashem v'al Mashiachai, and then they say, pasuk Gimel, natgas moisesemu, let's tear off his bonds. Let's throw off the rope. So that's again a parallelism in pasuk Gimel. But pasuk Gimel, I think, is what they're yege. In other words, pasuk Aleph presents us with the fact that they're making noise and they're thinking or saying something, and then the making noise is the gathering. That's in pasuk Beis, and the saying something is what they say in pasuk Gimel. And the subjects of their revolt is Hashem and Mashiachai, and then in order, Hashem and then Mashiachai are going to respond. Hashem, pasuk Daled, first doesn't respond, first laughs. Yeshu b'shamayim yischok Adonai yidlag lama. Again, we have the schik and lag, and it's one big joke. And then he does speak to them. Uz, there's an interesting point there. Uz, first he laughs, the whole thing's a joke, but then he decides to address them, engage them. And we have the Apai Charainoi, a very clear parallel, and his message is V'anina Sachti Malki Al Tzion HaKadoshi. That's what Hashem wants to tell them, that he appointed his king. And then the king speaks. Asapra, the first person, this is the king speaking, as we see in the Hamshech. So they were ganged up on Hashem and Mashiachai. Hashem says, Anina Sachti Malki Al Tzion HaKadoshi. And Mashiachai says, Asapra Al Chayk, which Rashi says means, I regularly say, I say this regularly, that Hashem Amar Elai, and here we have the duality, B'ni Ata Ani Hayim L'Ticha, and Hashem furthermore told me, so this is a quote that the Mashiach is quoting B'Shem Hashem. Hashem told me that you just have to ask me and I will be Goyim Nachlasecha Chazas Haaretz. We have the double thing. The next pasuk is again, Teroim B'Shem B'Badu Ch'Matz Same. So Hashem told me that I am his son. You are my son, I today born you. And you have to only ask and I will give you this inheritance of the nations and the edges of the earth, and you'll be able to crush them with the Shevet Barzel and smash them like Yaitzer. And therefore the conclusion is, so now the king turns to the other kings, the Mashiach turns to the other king and says, listen, this is the situation. And therefore, here's how to be. You want to be Bali Seichel, and again we have Malachim Askilu, Hivasu Shifte Eretz, Ivdu Es Hashem Be'ir, Gilu Ada. Here's the Maskana. Here's what you should do. And Nashkuvar, whatever that means, it's difficult to translate that. There's all sorts of pshatim what those words mean. Pen Ye'anaf, basically you're in big trouble. Hashem might get angry at you, which he sort of did already, right? Because he spoke to them ba'af, and he was warning them Pen Ye'anaf. We'll talk about that. And V'soiv Du Derech, because again his af can be burned kemat, so you're in big trouble. This is like the chasima. This is the conclusion. Okay, so you see how it's very tightly structured. It starts off with this attack and a statement, and there's two subjects of it, and then it describes the attack, the revolt, maybe is a better word, and and what the message is, and the response of the two subjects of the attack. First Hashem, who first laughs, then responds, and then the king, who quotes Hashem and as telling him that he can do what he wants with these other nations, and therefore, if they want, they better take this to heart and be smart, and realize that better watch out from Hashem's wrath, because you're in big trouble if you might lose the derech, and rather be a chaysim. Okay, it's the very beautiful structure of the mizmor. Okay, now let's go back to the beginning and let's make some comments. Okay, let's try to understand this a little better. Okay, so first we have this yegu, which picks up, at least mirrors we had in the first mizmor, which again is one mizmor, according to the Gemara. The king is yege, yom v'layla Torah, and these people are doing rik, which is of course the opposite of Torah, this saying empty things. The king, which Mizmor Aleph is about, the king as we discussed, and he's hoige b'Torah Hashem yom v'layla, and his enemies are yegu rik. And there's a whole theme about speaking, right? Because they say one thing, which is rik. Hashem says something, and then the king says, not only does he say something, but he says, Asapra al chayk, this is something I always want to say. I say this regularly. Okay? And what does he say? He says something that Hashem told him. So there's all about what statements are we making. It starts off with a rik statement, and the response are robust statements of Hashem, and the melech who quotes Hashem, and ends up with setting these kings straight with the correct message. Okay, now what do they do, these chevra? They are yisyatzvu malchei eretz. They stand up, they rise up, right? And there's a parallel here because an inversion, because they stand up on Hashem. He is yoshev b'shamayim. Yoshev is the opposite of nitzav. And Pasuk, I think the Rebbe points this out, that the Pasuk is trying to tell us that this whole endeavor of being misyatziv on Hashem is impossible, because he's yoshev, and as them misyatziv, it's kilu, they're going to stand up against him, but he's impervious, and he doesn't have to respond, because he's in Shemayim, obviously. So that's the joke. How can these kings who are malchei eretz, right? I just realized that now, in Pasuk Beis, these are malchei eretz, right? That's another obvious parallel. How could the malchei eretz be misyatziv on the yoshev b'shamayim? So it's one big joke. Okay. Now, what do they say? Pasuk Gimel, Nenatkas Moisrei Seimoi, Venashlichim Enave Seimoi. So the Rebbe points out that the response to them in Pasuk Yod, V'atem Malachim Haskilu Hivaseru Shoiftei Aretz. Hivaseru corresponds to Moisrei Seimoi. So Musar means to be bound, like Asur. Something's Asur means it's bound. So Nenatkas Moisrei is going to throw off his binds, and when he tells him Hivaseru Shoiftei Aretz, that's the response to what they were saying. They're not going to mention same. Okay? And based on that, the Rebbe takes it further and says, okay, that then suggests that they're throwing off Hashem, or they're rebelling against Hashem. The response to that is V'atem Malachim Haskilu. Okay? So how is Haskilu a response to Al Hashem? So the Rebbe says a beautiful thing. He says, you know what it means that they're rebelling on Hashem? What does it mean they're rebelling on Hashem? It means they're rebelling on the shikol hadas shenota Hashem b'leiv kol adam. It's a real Ibn Ezra kind of idea. They were rebelling. Hashem placed in every man common sense, and Hashem made a person yashar, and he has the ability to think straight. And the people that to drain their cups till they can't think straight anymore. That's what it means al Hashem. It's an amazing thing. We're seeing it being miskayim these days. Everyone's finding al Hashem. The pashat oiker Hashem from themselves when they make themselves lose their minds. That's what the Rebbe teaches. It's an amazing thing. And he says that, why does he say that? Because V'atem Malachim Haskilu is the response. He's like, don't be stupid. Stupid means you're fighting with Hashem. So V'atem Malachim Haskilu, in other words, there is a musar. You can't throw off the bonds and say, I'll think whatever I want, because that's rebellion to Hashem, because Hashem gave you a brain. And you want to lobotomize your brain and replace it with something else. So that's a fighting with Hashem, and that's like you don't want musar, meaning you don't want someone to tell you what to do. But Ma'aseh Hashem did tell you what to do because He gave you a brain. So accept that, have seichel and musar. That's the Ibn Ezra's taich, a beautiful taich. Okay, fine. So what happens over here? So we have a very strange thing over here. They have this uprising, there's rebellion against Hashem, but it's a joke because they're malchei aretz, and how can they misyatziv on Hashem? And taka yoshev b'shamayim yislak Hashem yilak alomei. But there's a little bit of a problem here. The problem is like this. So what were they thinking? It's a very strange thing. It's like, Okay, they're going to be Zatzav on Hashem, it's a joke. Okay, so Taka knew. What were they thinking? If they were thinking something, so what's the response to them? It just like makes it like, it's a non-starter. It's a little strange. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Okay, I want to be more of that. To me, that's a big problem in the structure. I mean, I have an answer. It points to somewhere. Again, the problem with the structure is that how do you say, like, they started a war on Hashem and Hashem laughs because he's in the Shemayim? Okay, so say that. So there's no war on Hashem. What were they thinking? Melin, Migdal Bavel, Nasalim, Migdal Bashir Shemayim. Okay, they want to ascend to heaven, they want to do something. Stam, Yatsu Machir al Hashem, and he laughs because he's in Shemayim, he's impervious. So what were they even doing? And also, you see, the truth is, there's a funny move over here because Pasuk K then says, Oz, first of all, there's an Oz over here. Like, okay, next step. So and he's like, first he laughs, and then he does a very strange thing, and then he speaks to them in wrath and anger. So laughing and mocking it's a joke, right? Why? Because what do you mean you're fighting Hashem? Okay, so it's a joke. It's one big joke. But no. Apparently it's not a joke because then he gets angry. But it's interesting because the anger is preceded with this Uz. It's like, okay, next thing that happens. So there's a move over here from Yoshe B'Shamayim Yitzchak that this whole thing is just not serious. Then there's this Uz. Okay? This is an interesting move. What's that about? And what does Hashem say? He's my king. I appointed him al Tzir and Har Kachi. That's the message. Where does Tzir and Har Kachi come in here? Why is that important? Why is that relevant at this point? That this king was placed on Tzir and Har Kachi. Okay? And also, let's note also, what is Hashem angry about? What is the essence? What is the content of Hashem's wrath? I made this king on Tzir and Har Kachi. It's doesn't seem to be wrathful or charoin. It's just a statement. This is my king. Well, yeah, it leads to anger, right? Because you're chopping my king, but it just leaves it hanging right there. What does Hashem say with his wrath? This is what Hashem says angrily. First he laughs and doesn't take it seriously, and then he speaks to them in anger and he says angrily, I have made this king. Okay? Which then, see, it sort of leaves things hanging, but now the king takes over. It makes perfect sense, right? Because we're segueing from Hashem. Once Hashem announced that I appointed the king, now the king has permission to speak in the name of Hashem, and he's going to actually literally speak in the name of Hashem and say what Hashem told him, right? So it's a hemshech. Okay, and what does the king say? Right? What does the king say? Which, by the way, I think it's in the first person. It just switches straight to the first person because I guess we're supposed to read it that this is the first person speaking the whole time, right? Lamurag Shugaim, who's speaking here? The king. Now, why is it the king? That supports that Mizmar Aleph is the king. Because otherwise, who says it's the king? Stam, Lamurag Shugaim. Anyone could ask that. Asaf could say that. Haman, whatever, all the people. Eson, Ezrachi, right? So, but it's assuming that's the king speaking. So I guess that's a raya that it's a hemshech of Mizmar Aleph, and that the Ish is the Torah Shem Chavz, is the Melech. So Melech here just switches straight to the first person, because that's who's been speaking till now. Okay? So what does he say? Now he says a very interesting thing. B'ni ata. Hashem told me, B'ni ata, ani hayom l'daticha. So the first question is, where did Hashem tell him B'ni ata? Where does this come from? When did Hashem tell him this? Secondly, you're finding it? We're in Shmuel? Okay, right. So in Shmuel, okay, 1 second. you could go for it. Yeah, I mean, Shmuel Beis Perek Zayin. Just to make it a little easier for you. Okay. No, we'll get that in a minute. You can definitely look it up for sure. But I want to read this pasuk. We have to ask that, right? Hashem Olam B'ni Ata. Where did he say that? And what's Ani Hayom? Today I gave birth to you. What's that today? What's that about? And also, what's this al-chayk? Asap al-chayk, I say this regularly. What's this business of, like, this is what he always says? What's that about? Okay? And next pasuk, he says, what did Hashem tell me that you could ask me and I'll give you good nachalo? Secha says to Ben Ezra, yeah, because a Bain receives nachalo. So once he said he's his Bain, it follows nachalo. And now I want to say, when did Hashem say this to him? Back to that question. So these two things we have by Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo had a dream and Hashem said to him, Sha'al mimeni, you could ask me for what you want. And he didn't ask for Goyim Nachlosecha, and Hashem said, oh, you didn't ask for that, so you're going to get that anyways. But you could have asked for that. It's like he has the option. Sha'al mimeni. All you have to do is ask. He didn't. See, that's what Stam is very interesting in this whole Mizmor, because the Mizmor is basically the king, I mean, just in the punchline, the king warns the other kings that, I have the option. All I have to do is ask. So you're in my, but he didn't ask. It's just like, I might ask, so therefore you better listen to my conditions, right? That's what's happening at the end. So similarly, by Shlomo HaMelech, Hashem told him, Sh'al mimeni ma'aten lach. He didn't ask for nefesh le'vecha. So okay, great, good. He asked for chachma. There too, it says about Shlomo too. Not there too. That story is in Malachim Aleph, Gimel or something, where Shlomo had a dream, and Hashem told him Sh'al mimeni. Similarly, about Shlomo, it says in Shmuel Beis Perek Zayin. What does it go? Who ani eyel avu yeli lebein. Okay, so there's obviously certain parallels. If we'll read this mizmor as referring to Shlomo, and I don't know how that works exactly. You know, are we supposed to read the mizmor about David exclusively, or Shlomo exclusively, or Mashiach exclusively, or we're allowed to mix and match and say there's these themes about the kingship, and maybe the mizmor is deliberately ambiguous about which king because it's a little bit about David, it's a little bit about Shlomo, it's a little about Mashiach himself, and so on and so forth. I would think that, but whatever. There seems to be two schools of thought about that. What?
I believe that Shlomo was also in between Bathsheba and in between. But
Hayom Yeled Ticha. I say the big birth of Shlomo. Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting. Right. Okay, that's cool. It's interesting because the Ibn Ezra says on the Hayom Yeled Ticha, the Ibn Ezra says this mizmor was said on the day that David was anointed to be king, and his right is because I need Hayom Yeled Ticha, and that's what he does with the Hayom. Which I don't like that pshat because not that I don't know enough about this in Tehillim in general. But this is a common mahalach in Tehillim. You find these weird things in the mizmor. You say, okay, so let's find the context, and that's the pshat. Meaning, if we only say that this mizmor was said on the day that he was anointed, then hayom is perfect. Okay, but I don't know if that's how for me, that's not how Bereshis work. It's supposed to like explain itself. You're not supposed to give a background story to make sense out of it. So that's why I'm not so sure with that. I don't know if I like that kind of mahalach. But what?
It's also, I'm saying.
What about it? What about the video? I don't understand.
Isn't it also part of the context of previous son?
So what?
Isn't it so similar? I'm saying Sufim in general.
No, but the Ibn Ezra is saying that the mizmor was said on the day of the anointment, even though there's no indication of that. Yes, there was a day that he was anointed. Okay, say it, but yeah, if the mizmor would connect to that day, right? If you would find parallels to that day, in other words, to Shmuel, whatever, where it says that V'yikach Shmuel Pach Hashem, and you find parallels in this mizmor, then I have no problem with that, right? But just you say, okay, there's a very odd thing over here. So you say, okay, Yesh Loimar, that this was said then, and there's no internal indication. I don't know if that meets the rules of. I wanted to say, who am I targeting the Ibn Ezra and Pirush HaMikra? If I'm Zeich, I'm going to go to his Chumash here and after Shabbos davening in Adam Haba. That's my plan. So. But that's what I would think. I'm saying this kind of shot, that would be my response. I mean, but I just have to tell you what I think of that, obviously. Okay, anyways. Fine, right there. Where are we up to here? Okay, so that's the pasuk. Right, so that's the suggestion for the background for B'ni Ata. The Hayom is still a question. I'm going to get back there and say a different shot. And the Sh'al Mimeni, like I said, Sh'al Mimeni and B'ni Ata are we have that by Shlomo. We also have by David HaMelech and Mizmor Peites. Af ani hu yikroeni aviata, ani ekrolei b'ni, I think. Af ani b'chor etnehu elyon al malchei eretz. This is a pasuk in Mizmor Peites, which of course is very similar to here because that's about David, because it says he's going to be over the malchei eretz. He's going to be superior to the malchei eretz. It's like he's telling him b'ni ata, and therefore you control the malchei eretz. Achuz dasa afsei eretz. So here's his message to the malchei eretz. So that's also a parallel for sure. That's also a parallel, but I still want to know. It still bothers me. First of all, what's the asapra al chayk, like he says all the time, and what's the hayom yeled ticha? Okay, even though we find other places this message of B'ni Ata to Shlomo and to David. Okay, so then the upshot is that since this king controls all of them, and if he wants to, he can crush them. Therefore, he can set the terms for them to. Not to suffer his wrath or Hashem's wrath, maybe channeled through him, which I think is a key idea of it, right? Because here we have Hashem's wrath, starts off with Hashem's wrath, that this is my king, and then the king picks up and starts talking in the name of Hashem and saying, yes, Hashem is so angry, he lets me crush you, but I'm not going to crush you as long as you guys are good, but watch out because Hashem's wrath can. So in other words, we're talking about Hashem's wrath that's channeled through the king who mediates it because he's Hashem's son, right? So it's sort of, that's the logic here. And his message is, look, you better watch out, and you better be smart, and Ivdu as Hashem b'yira, instead of saying you're not the same way, which means you're not serving Hashem, you're throwing off his yokes, Ivdu, you have to serve him. And watch out, pen yenaf, yiver kamat apoy, as Hashem got angry in the beginning of the Mizmor, where he spoke to you with anger. Instead, Ashrei Kachoy Sivoy, and this is bring us back to the Ashrei Ha'ish, who's the subject of this Mizmor, right? The one who's speaking in the first person. He's the one who's secure. Okay, so basically like this. So we went to the Mizmor, and we see there's this theme of Hashem choosing the Melech, and therefore the Melech speaks for Hashem, and so on and so forth, right? So I want to say that we could look at this Mizmor, and I think this helps understand what's happening. We look at this Mizmor as a conversation or a theological, whatever you want to call it, question of the relationship between Hashem and the Melech. Okay? And let's start with the problem I said, which is that they ganging up on Hashem, who's Yeshua B'Shamayim, so what were they thinking? Right? And if they were thinking something, then there's no response to it. That problem, right? So here's the pshat. The pshat is like this. This Mizmor is dealing with what is the relationship between Hashem and Mashiach. This is what I want to suggest. And I want to suggest there's two ways to look at that relationship. You have this king, he's the Mashiach Hashem, right? Let's say he's David or the Mashiach, whatever. In what sense is he the Mashiach of Hashem? Okay, so now the angry message of Hashem is Ani nosachti malchi al tziyun hakodesh, right? So that's the chiddush, kilu, right? If you want to know, like, what were they thinking? Well, I know what they had to be told. Ani nosachti malchi al tziyun hakodesh. So then we could reverse engineer and say, they didn't know that Hashem made him king, right? They knew he's the Mashiach of Hashem, but they didn't know that Hashem made him king. So if Hashem didn't make him king, then he's the Mashiach of Hashem means that he took Hashem as his God. So these are the two tzadim. The king who stands for Hashem, where's the movement? Where does it come from? Does it start from Hashem who made him king? Or did this king of Israel, David, Mashiach, whatever, take Hashem as his God? Okay, this I think is fair. Because if the message to them is Ani nosachti malchi, Shemar, they thought that this king didn't become the king of Hashem because Hashem initiated it. He became the king of Hashem because he decided he'll stand up for Hashem and be the king on Hashem's behalf. So now, if he decided to be the king for Hashem's behalf, then he is another Malchei Eretz. He's just another Malchei Eretz. He might be a Malchei Eretz that stands for Hashem, okay, but I'm a Malchei Eretz that stands for a Baal or whatever, who's maybe admittedly lower than Hashem, whatever you deal with the theology over there. But they could start a war al Hashem v'al Mashiach because he is merely another Malchei Eretz. He's not fundamentally different than them. It's my God against his God. Beseder, we'll deal with that. Old fights. Kamash Malon, says Hashem, no. He is not. It's not Hashem v'Mashiach because this particular Melech Eretz chose me. Actually, it starts from Shemayim. So first of all, the first thing is Yeshua B'Shamayim Yitzchak. You think Hashem is merely the God of this Melech Eretz? No, it's not. Because Hashem is in this picture, not because this Melech Eretz chose him. Hashem is in this picture because Hashem is B'Shamayim. Everything starts from there. So first of all, the first thing I do is laugh. Meaning because Hashem is in Shemayim, Hashem is not merely the God of this king. It's the opposite. This king is the representative of Hashem who's in Shemayim. So first step is I'm in Shemayim, so clapping me, the whole thing's a joke. Now, what about my king? Well, my king, Ani nosachti malchi, this king is an extension of me. And that's why the pasuk says, remember I asked, why does it say Al Tzion Har Kachi? Because the Har is something that's close to Shemayim. That's always a theme in Tanakh. So he's saying he's not Stam Melech Eretz like any other Melech Eretz. He's a shtickle Shemayimi. Why? Because everything started from Hashem who's in the Shemayim, Hashem and Shemayim is the one who made this king the king, and that's why he put him on a mountaintop, on a holy mountain, because that makes him raised above the earth, on a mountain, and a holy place, thereby he becomes heavenly. So everything is being flipped around. Don't think that this king is another Melech Eretz who happens to choose Hashem. This is the opposite. Hashem who's in the Shemayim, and therefore laughs at your attempts. He is the one who instated this king in a heavenly way. So it's not that the king adopted Hashem, it's Hashem adopted the king. And therefore the king is like Hashem's son, and a king, thank you, has Hashem kind of powers. Okay, understand? That's the whole shmooze that's happening over here. They are Malchei Aretz, thank you, and they think that it's one Melech Aretz against the other. And that Melech Aretz, the one that's called Mashiach Hashem, happens to be a Mashiach Hashem. And this Melech Aretz is a Mashiach of whatever God that he's the Mashiach of. Kamash Malon, then no, everything works different over here. It starts from Shemayim, and from that perspective it's a joke. But Oz, there's another move. That's what the Oz is doing. Because yes, Hashem Kishala Atzma is Yeshiva Shemayim, it's a joke. But Hashem then chose to concern himself with what happens on earth and appoint a king that's going to represent Hashem B'Shemayim. So, okay, well then Hashem gets angry. And his anger is, that king is working for me. Once he says that king is working for me, the king takes over. Okay, but those are the two shlam. And that king takes over and he speaks on Hashem's behalf and he says, yes, I'm going to speak on Hashem's behalf. Hashem chose me and I'm going to tell you what's going to happen to you because I decide. Why do I decide? Because Hashem made me king and he empowered me with his own power. So just like he's Yeshiva Shemayim, I'm also behind Kochi and you guys are in big trouble. Okay? Fine. Now that's the so what did I respond? What did I solve now? Just what were they thinking? What the response is? Why does it go Yeshiva Shemayim and then Oz? Right, and then the diak of the Malchei Aretz and the Yeshiva Shemayim, and the question is: this Mashiach, is he a Melech Aretz? Yes and no, because he's Bahar Kochi, so he's not quite Aretz. He's somewhere in between the Aretz and the Shemayim, so to speak. Okay, so far so good. Now I want to get back to the point of that strange pasuk Zayin, where the king announces that he regularly says, okay, so why does he say this regularly? Why is it Sapel Chayk? When did Hashem tell him B'ni Ata? And what's this Yelidaticha? A very interesting lashon, Yelidaticha. Actually, I don't know if I'm going to answer that. But what's this Hayom? Today. Okay? So I was thinking, I started thinking about Krias Sh'ma. Now, why was I thinking about Krias Sh'ma? Of course, we spoke about Krias Sh'ma last week. I'll review that briefly. But I remember that in Krias Sh'ma, in the bracha before Krias Sh'ma, we started talking about Hashem as our Father. Avinu, Avarachamon, they should teach us Torah, right? So, what I realized was, this is mamish for Krias Sh'ma, okay? But first, let me just give you the background to remind you again. Last week we spoke about Mizmor Aleph, that the king has to be Haygeh B'Toras Hashem Yom V'Layla. That's about a king, just like it says in Sefer Yeshua. The Yeshua was a king, and he was told V'Gisa B'Yom V'Layla. And we spoke furthermore about the fact that it's the first Sefer in Ksuvim, the first Sefer in Nevi'im. So similarly, the first Sefer in Mishnah talks about V'Gisa B'Yom V'Layla, which is B'Shach of Kumecha, and is done in a kingly way because the shir for Krias Sh'ma is Dech B'nei Malachim, and we discussed that saying Krias Sh'ma is being kingly. As it says in the Zohar Chadash, so I want to repeat this because it just came clear to me. The Zohar Chadash says, it's beautiful lashon. Ki mechabdei achabed, Hashem respects those who respect Him. A human being that makes Hashem king on heaven and earth and the four ruchas in this world. Hashem will mamlech him. That's why they say every tzaddik has his own world. In that world, the man is completely like in the image of his master. So how can you say God is a king? Man is not a king. The answer is every tzaddik is going to have a world of his own over which he rules. Okay? That's when man is betzalmoi. And by being Malach Kadosh Baruch Hu, you're Zeiche that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is Malach. So what just became clear to me over last week, and so Pasha, you read this a medrash like that, you think it's like schar. It's like schar, b'schar that you Malach Hashem, Hashem is Malach. But really, it's not that. It's that a person wants to be B'tzal Melikim. That's the nature of a person. So by contemplating Malchus Shemayim, you become inspired and you learn how to be a melech. Especially it's Hilchas Malachim. Hilchas Malachim, of how to be a melech, and the inspiration to become a melech, that comes from Krias Sh'ma. So when a person is B'nei Mach Shemayim and understands the nature of Mach Shemayim, then he too, if he's a tzaddik, he wants to emulate that. Because he wants to be Tzalem Elikim, and then he will achieve that. That's the oimek of this Zohar Chadash. So in other words, so last week we spoke about two things. First of all, V'gisa b'yom v'layla is a mitzvah for a king. We also have the mitzvah V'gisa b'yom v'layla shachol kumecha. But not only that, but the content, which we spoke about, it's also became clear that the content of Krias Sh'ma is not just Stam Torah. The content of Krias Sh'ma is Malchus Shemayim, is what the king has to learn. So the mitzvah of Akar B'Kol Mechayev is the king should know Malchus Shemayim. Malchus Shemayim, in the summary, is called Torah Kula, but in short, it's Krias Sh'ma. So Krias Sh'ma is the limit of being a king. Okay. Now this pasuk, Zayin, I want to say it's talking about Krias Sh'ma. Because you know where it says, B'ni ata ani hayoyim v'ledaticha, mamish before Krias Sh'ma. V'hoyu advar ma'ela asher anoichi mitzavecha hayoyim, al levavecha v'shinantom levanecha. Hashem is teaching us something today, and Chazal say today, every day is supposed to be like new. It's supposed to be like every day you're learning from Hashem. And that thing that Hashem is commanding you, you have to then teach to your sons. So Hashem is doing to you what you are supposed to do to your sons. Which means Hashem is treating you like a son. So Asapra al-Chayk, I say all the time. He says in the morning, he says in the evening. He says Krias Sh'ma. And Krias Sh'ma teaches him that B'ni ata ani hayoyim v'ledaticha. I receive, because every day he's supposed to receive the Torah. You're supposed to learn from Hashem something that you're supposed to teach to your own children. So therefore that message of Krias Sh'ma, which is the message of Malchus Shemayim, which a king has to hear, is the message of B'ni ata ani hayoyim v'ledaticha. And he says this all the time, Asapa Achaik. So this is continuing. And they are Yegurik. He's coming back, he's saying, you know what I say, Yom V'Layla? You know what I'm always saying? The chayk, the regular statement that I'm saying is the one that's already referenced in Mizmor Aleph. The Chetzer Yeh Yom V'Layla. You know what I say? You know what that tells me? It tells me, B'ni ata ani hayoyim v'ledaticha, and therefore, don't even try. And by the way, the raya to this pshat is because I said, when Akdama to Krias Sh'ma, we talk about Hashem as a father. And what do we say there? We say Hashem should teach us Torah. Avinu Avraham teach us Torah. Why? Because we're about to say in Krias Sh'ma that a father has to teach his son Torah. And also says in Krias Sh'ma that Hashem is being mitzvah us. Okay, so apparently, Klape Talmud Torah, Hashem acts to us like a father. And then once he does our father, so that means Sham Menemet Negoyim Nachalosecha, which I guess you could also think about, the message to Shlomo, who's the one that Hashem said he's my son, and Hashem told him you could ask me for what you want, and he asked for Chachma. So maybe that's to do with it also. Like the Spitz, really a son could get lots of stuff. You can get Nachla also. But the highest level is Sapra al-Chayk, is what we do in Krias Sh'ma. Okay, and there's some interesting things to think about. Another thing to think about that is we don't say Avinu. Why don't we ever say Avinu in Tefillah? It's a very strange thing. We say it by Hashem, Avinu l'serasecha, and Avinu avaracham. While you'd think Avinu is such a powerful idea, we say it all the time, like Avinu Alkeinu. When we really need it, we say it. But our regular, we don't say Avinu. We only say it in the context of Torah. So that's interesting that if we're going to plug in the Shlomo story of Sha'al Mimani, and Shlomo was told, you could be my son, now his son could get Nachla if he wants, right? As it says over here, if I want to, I could control the whole world and crush you kings. But I don't. All I want is, if Hashem B'yirah, then I'll leave you alone. Why? Because with Shlomo Melech was not Shoyal, the Nachla that he could have, really only wants his Chachma. So it's like the real focus of Avinu was supposed to limit to Talmud Torah. And it's Ben Allah. Maybe, just thinking, maybe that goes together. Anyways, okay, so that's what I wanted to say. Yeah, I think that's done. Oh, right, one last thing is that perhaps you could find the same idea in a Melech too, because in Parashat Shoftim it says really a similar thing. Hashem chooses the Melech, and then Hu Ubanov are Melachim. So Melucha goes from the king to his Ben, but it starts from Hashem choosing him. So that again, the same way I'm saying, the pasuk in Shema says Hashem teaches us and we teach our children. So apparently Hashem is like our father. Well, if it goes from Hashem to the first king to his sons, maybe in the context of Melucha also, that tells you that the Melech is like the son of Hashem, and he's like the heir of Hashem's Melchus. which of course goes together with Shema, that we're learning Hashem's Malchus, and therefore we. In other words, Hashem wants to teach you what? What is Hashem teaching you? That He's a Melech. And why is He teaching you that? Because you're His son. Okay, and then Melucha Gufa goes from a father to a son, right? So that's just another reason why learning Shema makes you into a Melech, because if Hashem is teaching you Shema is what does Hashem want to teach you? Want to teach you Shema. Why? Because you have to teach Torah to your children. So Hashem is treating you as His child. And Melucha goes from a father to a son, boom, there you go. So you become a Melech too. On your day, Krias Sh'ma.